Hi, my name is Wayne Walker, and today we're going to talk about skill saw safety. Now, at some point, you guys are going to go out into the shop, and we're going to cut various 2x4s at certain lengths, also at certain angles. Now, the thing about a skill saw is that we got to pay a lot of attention to the safety part of a skill saw. Now, I've been in construction for over 40 years, and guess what? I still respect this thing probably more now that I've been doing it for a long time than I did when I first started. What happens is, especially with a lot of guys, is they get super comfortable with the skill saw. They call it an extension of a carpenter's arm. This is probably the most popular tool for carpenters, probably your tape measure and your hammer and a skill saw. Those are the three things that you're probably going to use the most as a carpenter. Like I was saying, a lot of guys get comfortable with the skill saw and they get on autopilot, let's just say that. And they kind of lose the fear of it. Not that I'm afraid of it, but I respect it, okay? So we're gonna talk about various safety features of a skill saw itself, okay? I was looking on the internet, and they were saying that this is the 5th most dangerous tool that people will use. Pneumatic nail guns was the first one. Chainsaws, table saws, another one which escapes me, and then this guy. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're being careful and we're respecting this tool, okay? Now, before we get out there, I just want to talk about certain safety things, okay? First of all, what you want to do is hopefully you can find a skill saw that's in good condition. You want to make sure that everything's working. First of all, we want to look at the cord. You want to go through this whole cord and make sure there are no nicks and cuts. What happens is a lot of guys, when they're not paying attention and they're cutting, and invariably the cord gets caught up in the skill saw. Sometimes, not all the time, but there are times when it gets caught up. What we want to make sure is that we're keeping that cord away from the saw. Okay. The next thing you want to do is just make sure and see if all the features on this skill saw are working. Right? Can I change my angle? Is it too tough to do, or can I do it easily? Can I change my depth? This is a big one. This is a big deal right here because when we're cutting certain pieces, we want to make sure that we're cutting at a certain depth, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Does my guard work? This is probably the biggest one. If you take your skill saw, you should be able to hold it like this, and that guard should click back. Sometimes when we're cutting, you might get a piece of wood inside that between your guard and the blade, okay? And it will not come down. It will not come down. It will stick because it's jammed between your blade and the guard. So what's going to happen is your blade will not retract. It's going to stay there, and that's when we have problems, okay? Then, not yet, but what you want to do a lot of times is just check the trigger. What happens is, especially on older skill saws, they've been beat up a lot. What will happen is you pull on the trigger, and guess what? You can let go of the trigger, and somehow the saw keeps running, okay? So we definitely want to you kind of want to go through and make sure that you go through the whole thing and make sure that, everything's in working order, okay? Probably the most important thing, though, is a sharp blade. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen students, I tell everybody, look, if you need a blade, let's change out your blade. Nobody ever wants to change out the blade when they want to get out there and start hacking stuff, right? Well, that's fine and dandy, but the problem is if you have a bad blade, you're going to burn through the wood instead of cut through the wood, right? I've literally seen smoke come out of some of the guys trying to make a cut, especially when you're doing a compound miter. We'll talk about that in a minute. And other times I've seen the blade get so hot when you take it away from the saw or take it away from the piece of wood, the blade is warbling because it's so heated, it's lost its shape. And what you have to do is kind of run it, and then you can see this shape come back to what it should look like, okay? All right. Now, right now, I do not have this saw plugged in. Now, this is a brand new blade. If we were going to change the blade, the first thing we do is we unplug the cord. Don't give yourself any kind of chance of getting hurt. You always want to take that equation out. Always, always unplug your cord. Now, I'm not going to do a full demonstration because mainly we're just talking about safety, but if you had to change your blade, you need a saw wrench, right? If you look back on the skill saw, they have this little button. What you do is you hold that button in. What you have to do is you have to turn it till it locks in. You'll feel it click in. You can't turn the blade. You take off this nut, take out the blade, put the new blade in, and make sure that the teeth are going forward. Skill saws cut in this direction, right? Don't put it on backwards. You're not going to like the cut, okay? Once you get that thing back in, you'll tighten it up. Now you don't have to go G.I. Joe Kung Fu grip. You know, you're only supposed to tighten it just enough to hold that thing. You know, they even say on this thing, an 1/8 turn at finger tightening. So don't go crazy, because sometimes some guys over tighten the blades. All right. Now, most people, when they use a skill saw for the first time, you can tell they're scared, and that's okay. We should be afraid, because this thing can hurt you, right? If used wrong. It's not a, it's, you know, don't think you're going to be a macho person, man or woman, and just, you know, use a skill saw for the first time and just think that, you know, oh, I can do this all day long. You can, but what we want to do is let's just be safe, okay? So let's plug it in first. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the trigger on and see if the blade sticks, or if the trigger sticks. That's good. Means the blade's working, right? Or the trigger's working, okay? Now, once we start cutting wood, everybody's wearing safety glasses. Everybody, me included. Hard hat, safety glasses, and also what I would encourage you guys is some kind of hearing protection. This tool is about between 90 and 95 decibels. Guess what? OSHA's limit on decibels is 90. So every time you're using this skill saw, you're pushing the limit. And what we don't want to do is, you know, you don't want to get to be an old carpenter like me and not being able to hear anything. Now, I'm fortunate. I've always been adamant about wearing hearing protection. So hopefully you will too. All right, so it's cutting with a skill saw. Okay. So it's not rocket science, but, you know, there are certain things that you can do, you know, to feel more comfortable cutting with it. And also I want to talk about some things I see a lot of students doing that just make no sense, and I always catch them doing it. So, okay. So what we want to do is when we go out there, you're going to have to make various cuts. Now, some of them are going to be easy cuts. Let's talk about the first one. It's just going to be a square cut. Now, here's something you can do also. Most of us are going to cut like this. Oh, and by the way, notice I'm cutting on sawhorses. That's a big deal. What you're going to see on job sites, and I've done it myself, guilty as charged, right, is we cut off, we'll put the board on our foot and cut off the board off our foot. A lot of places don't like that. A lot of schools do not like that either. A lot of job sites don't like that later. Sometimes guys will have a board here and cut this way too. What that does, if it kicks back on you, you're opening yourself up to being cut severely, okay? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're cutting off our sawhorses like this, okay? Now, some of you guys may want to use two hands, especially your first timers, and that's fine. What I would do is if you have a clamp, you can clamp this thing down, because what it's doing is it's holding that wood, so you can use two hands if you wanted to cut a piece of wood. So let me get the hearing protection in. You can use two hands. Now, some of you may want to do it this way, and that's fine. You know, what I'm doing here is I didn't want the board to slide on me. You could do it like that, or you could put your clamp over here. The reason why I like this one here is because what happens is a lot of students keep their sawhorses together, and the board tends to want to flop. Okay, so let me just pull this one over a little bit, and I'll re-show the other one. There's my clamp. If you want to do two hands, you can do the two hands, because what's happening is you don't have to worry about that other hand being in the way and being vulnerable to a cut, right? All right, so that's a square cut. Now, sometimes we have to make other kinds of cuts, and some of these other cuts can be kind of dangerous, okay? Sometimes we have to do a miter cut. So let's just say you take your square, you make a miter cut. I'm just just going to do a 45-degree cut. Again, if you want to clamp your wood down, that's fine. If you want to take 2 hands, that's fine. Just like that. Now, let's talk about something here real quick. What you want to do is whatever kind of material you're cutting through, you always kind of want to set your blade depth. Now on a 2x4, you could leave this thing buried if you want to call it that. If you don't feel comfortable about that, what you can do is you can take your skill saw, set it to the depth maybe 1/8 below your material, and then make your cut. Because what's happening is you're not cutting any more than what you need to cut. If I'm going to cut a piece of wood this thick, 3/8, I don't want to bury my blade all the way down, because when I cut through this, guess what? I'm going to cut through my supports too. I've seen a lot of students cut through their sawhorses because they had they're cutting a piece of plywood, they're cutting it this way, they're ripping it, but they've also cut their sawhorse in half because they didn't set the blade. So to set the blade, what you can do is put the material down, let this thing go down, right on top of the material, and you're good to go. You can cut it with that. It's very, very important, is setting your depth. Probably one of the most important things you can do. Another thing is I see a lot of students will do stuff like this. They'll take a full sheet of plywood without any 2x4s here, right? Lay it down, and what they'll do is they want to sit there and cut all the way through that plywood. Now the problem with that is the plywood does this. There's a thing called kickback. Kickback is when you're cutting, the wood binds and their saw pops back at you. That's how people get hurt. There's been over 10,000, 2018, there were over 10,000 accidents with the circular saw. So remember, we want to respect it, right? Now, there's another kind of cut called a plunge cut. You guys are going to have to do this. This is going to be probably the most dangerous one. What a plunge cut is basically, is you're taking this skill saw, you're starting it at this position, and then you're going to drop the blade down while it's running. Also, what we want to make sure is when we're cutting, don't have the blade next to the material. Keep it a ways back. Start it back away from the material, maybe 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. Let the skill saw get up to speed and then cut through the wood, right? We don't want to just have it right next to the wood, slammed against the wood, because guess what's going to happen? It's going to kick back on you. So make sure that you're starting it away from the wood. Now the plunge cut, first of all, what we want to do is we want to set our depth. Okay? Now, let's just say, hey, I'm going to mark a piece of wood here. That's my line. So the plunge cut is you're going to cut in line with that line, okay? Let the blade stop. Well, the blade's turning, don't just pull it up. And what we also don't do is if I'm making a cut and I stop and I let go of the saw, you'll see people do this also. They'll cut and then they let go of the saw while the blade's still spinning so they can reposition themselves. Guess what? That is a recipe for disaster. If that thing moves, let's say you touch the cord a little bit, it's going to come back on you, it's going to run back. Now, it may not hurt you, but it might hurt somebody else. Also, another thing that I've seen students do is they'll have their sawhorses really close, okay? And what happens is they want to cut a board like this. And so they're pushing it, and all of a sudden the board starts kicking away. And they have a heck of a time trying to cut the board. One easy way, well actually there's a couple easy ways. Again, clamp it down. Put a clamp on it. That way you're safe, you're holding it. Or if you just take your wood, turn it up a little bit where it's pinching the sawhorse, you can make that cut in a safe manner. Not chasing the wood where your board's flying off this way, flying off that way, right? This is, what we want to do is we want to be safe. That's the most important thing, is safety, okay? All right, so again, we're going to go out to the shop. We're going to make various kinds of cuts. You guys are going to cut, I have a sheet that has certain lengths, certain angles, right? You guys are going to be graded on your lengths. Hopefully the measurements are right. And most importantly, you're going to be graded on your safety. We have to take this tool seriously. This is like a table saw in your hand. And guess what? The blade always wins, right? Nobody here is Superman, all right? So when we get out there, I'll give everybody a skill saw. We're gonna check our skill saws first for any kind of defects, and then we'll change the blades. Everybody gets a brand new blade, and I'll show you how to do that. And then what we'll do is we'll start cutting our wood in a safe manner. Everybody will circle me. Everybody gets in a big circle, all right? All right, so that's skill saw safety, and thanks for paying attention.